And hi, I am Heather Wilde coming to you from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. I am really excited to be talking to you today about a passion of mine that a lot of you may not know about. But first, I wanted to let you all know that this is a telethon. Please donate to Direct Relief. I know I donated earlier today. My husband and I, Matthew Renzi, we put $100 in from Serenzi Global, our nonprofit. So please make sure that you donate at least that much while my talk is going on. So thank you, everyone. Please go to the slides, production people. All right, today's talk is I spent millions on video game development so you don't have to. Who am I? Why should I be talking about this today? Well, again, my name is Heather Wilde. I am the CTO of a company called Rocketeer, TWIP. I've had over 20 years of experience in game development, customer experience, all sorts of things. I'm one of the only women to have ever served as the advisory board chair of an engineering school, blah, 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 lots of stuff. But here's the thing that's most relevant to this. I have directly been involved in the development of all of these games that you are seeing on the screen right now. So 6 games, including the one in the upper right corner, that one I coded and wrote all by myself. And that's how I actually got my start in the game industry. But this is going to be an interactive talk here. So just like any game would be, I have a poll running. So if you go to that website that you see on the screen, you can actually help and talk to me during this talk. So have you ever published your own game for sale? I want to know this. How many of you, or actually, have you ever done this? I have. Obviously, I've been involved in 6 of them so far in my life. And also I've advised other people. But how many of you have done this? So we'll find out about that after the talk. But for everyone, when you start a life in gaming, there's always some game that gets you on that path. And for me, it was this game. It was called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, I loved the book. I had this amazing experience when I first read the book. But when my dad brought home this game that looked like no other game that I'd ever seen before, and then when I turned it on, and the first thing that it said was, "It is pitch black." And I didn't know what it was. It was this story that immersed you right from the first start. You had to start typing into it and asking it questions, and it was an immersive world, and that got me going into a life of playing games. A lot of indie developers think that they can become an overnight success, but it really takes years and years. And it was about 10 years from the time that I first fell in love with games by playing Hitchhiker's Guide until the time that I actually published and released my first game that got me into the door at a studio. So you may not know this, but 155 Americans play video games. 155 million. That's more than half of the adult population of this country. 4 out of 5 households own a device used to play video games. Now you think, oh, well, everybody has a cell phone, but not everybody has a smartphone that can play like a really good game. Although Snake is still one of my favorite games of all time, those of you that remember that. So that's 42% of Americans play games at least 3 hours a week. That's a lot of us playing games out there, right? And for those of you that didn't realize this, the money that comes from video games is way more than we spend on music and films combined. So this is a huge, huge industry. We are spending more on games to play than we spend on movies. So the problem is that every game developer, anyone that's ever built a game, anyone that's in this industry will tell you that unlike movies, unlike music, they have no clue what's going to sell. It's kind of like the nightclub industry. Like you will work on something for years and then it's just going to fall into the trash. So if you want to go into it though, how do you do it? So the first step, just like with anything that you build, is you need to have an idea. And with games, it's a little bit different than writing a business plan. You have to just work on writing a storyboard. Like you write this out. You draw out how you want this game to go. And realistically, you want to always do your first level last, because however you think it's going to start, it's not going to come together until you know what the rest of it looks like. And then if you think you're going to be pitching to investors, then forget it, because no one's going to give you money if you're an indie developer. It's just not going to happen. You could luck out like Exploding Kittens or something like that with Kickstarter, but don't even think about going down the investment route. You want to spend your time working on developing your game, storyboarding it out, figuring out how to build it, and then build something. Because you don't make money by working on things, you make money by shipping them. The next thing you got to do is define your audience. You got to figure out what platform people are on to play games. So I see people are already answering this question. What's the preferred platform for you for playing games? Like, people need to play a game on different things, and therefore there's different kinds of development that you do for a console game versus a mobile game versus an AR game, and so on. So if you want to develop a game on a different platform, obviously you need to learn a different language to do that, or have different skills for that. So the average gamer, for your audience, you need to figure out, like, are you going to go for a game that's targeted towards women over 50? Because there's 12% of your audience right there, and they may be looking for something that's different from the male under 18 crowd. So figure out who you're looking for. Now, kids like under a certain age may only have access to devices like a Kindle Fire that have screen time lock on it. So think about what you would develop for them versus somebody that plays only on a Nintendo Switch, or people that have access to consoles and use that all the time versus the PC gamers. These are different people playing in different places, different types of games, a completely different audience. Then define your genre. Knowing what platform you're developing for helps you to understand what genre you can use. So like those kids games that I was talking about, who remembers Oregon Trail? That was awesome, right? I still log in sometimes and give my sister dysentery. So all you need to do is figure out what's the next kind of thing that you're going to do for edutainment, or come up with a new kind of thing. So Cosmo, for example, was a wonderful robot skill game that can connect with something like Scratch, or you can come up with the next Scratch game, or something for edutainment industry. Grand Theft Auto. These guys are amazing. They just keep coming out with awesome stuff, but it's a completely different type of game than Oregon Trail. And then, of course, there's the strategy type games. Now, most casual gamers fall into this kind of thing. In fact, most of the gaming that I do right now is through VR. I spend a lot of time with Beat Saber, and it's like meditative for me. Tetris Effect is one of my favorite games to play. So make a budget. Now that you know what platform you're doing and what genre you're going to go down, you have to understand how much you're going to spend. If you're going to develop a console game, then that is going to cost you millions of dollars. The average console game for the PS4, and likely for the PS5 as well, and also the Xbox and the new Scarlet, costs between $30 to $80 million and requires about 100 people on a team. For a PC game, for something that's going to be released that a lot of people are going to see with big distribution, this is going to cost between $60,000 to about $150,000 minimum. For an MMORPG, The cheapest I've seen someone release one for is around $50,000, but don't let that fool you, because you still, like, the more popular you are, your big costs are going to be in the servers, in upgrades, and then giving people more patches and more upgrades. And then something like Flappy Bird can be done for free or as cheap as possible. In fact, your most expensive thing might be royalty for the sound that you paid for. So make sure that you always get your royalty rights for the images and the sound that you use ahead of time. Now, this is on a logarithmic scale, as my husband, Matthew Renzi, made sure that I added in there. So at the bottom, you're seeing that Flappy Bird only cost about $300 to develop, right? But it goes all the way up to the top of Grand Theft Auto costing $265 million. And there's everything across the board in there. You'll see that Pokemon Go from Niantic was $650,000 for the initial development, but their servers cost a lot of money to keep going. And every development along the way costs them more money as well. The next thing you need to do is get a team. So you have, obviously, if you're going to be building these things, whether it's a small thing or a bigger one, you're going to have to fill these roles. Now, if you're an indie with only like 1 or 2 people, then you're all going to have to fill these roles. If it's a big company, then it's going to be departments with a lot of people under these, but they all have to be filled. So you're going to need game designers, programmers, graphic designers, animators, sound designers, visual effects people, QA, beta testers, legal, and finance. All of those. So coming back to, so I've done this. I've actually released games. And here's what it looked like. So our first game that we released at a studio called Genetic Anomalies that I worked at was called Chron-X. And we had to put an entire game together, which was a collectible card game. This is one of the screens that was inside the game. And this is what it looked like in the gameplay mode. And here's another screen from that. The next game that we developed was called Star Trek Conquest Online. And here's the opening screen when you logged in. It looked very much like the Star Trek game. Now you can imagine that when you go from a property that is completely your own to one that is a Star Trek property, that there's a lot of royalty costs that are involved in this. Even just using their font cost money, and the colors cost money. Now, I'm showing you individual screens of this game because you'll see that every single thing we developed required us to pay royalties to the company for the usage of those things. So think in your mind all of the costs adding up here. Now, here's, as I mentioned before, you have to storyboard the game. You have to think about how this works out, how the gameplay is going to work, and how people are going to play. For this, it was a very simple card game, kind of like slap them down Pokemon style game, and it played very well. It was a very simple thing. People liked it. However, we had a few issues, which I will get into in a minute. It looked really nice, and for a game that's 20 years old, it looks very nice. It looks like something that could be released today. So the next part of any game is you have to sell it. So there are a lot of sales options. There's a lot of money to be made in games, all sorts of games, depending on which way you've picked. There's a lot of money in all of them. But if you want to go freemium, the ad revenue can outstrip the actual sales of your online games, and by a lot. So in mobile games, like if you're going to do a mobile game and you want to release it for free, just stick some ads in there, and there's a $65 billion pie to be earned from. So, but you need to find a distributor. If there is no distributor for your game, then you're going to earn no money at all. So the first thing we did for Chron-X, which was a property that had nothing at all, it was our own indie. We found a distributor for it. We found multiple distributors and had people download it. But in order to have more people find out about it, we also had to go to conferences. We had to pay money. We had to create a booth. I had to dress up in costume and be a booth babe and go and get people to buy our games. And that actually attracted us to one of these lovely people that got us to be purchased by THQ. And THQ was a popular game company at the time, and they helped us to get a deal with Activision. So Activision was a very lucky thing, because when you are pitching your game, even if it's fully developed, if you are in the industry already, you are not necessarily going to get your game bought. So we already had a completely designed and released and popular game, and we actually got somebody to agree to release it on their own, and to buy us for the next one. But that very rarely happens, as you can see here. So when they did decide to release a game, they did a deal with Paramount and Activision to release this. We even got to sneak in the Tar Monster as a piece, because why not? But every single piece we did, there was a royalty that had to be paid to the characters. So that's more money adding up as to the cost of this thing. I mean, the box design was so beautiful. I loved it. I had so many on my shelf. And then we also had a release around the world in EB Games and a couple of other game stores at the time, right when you walked into the store, all the way straight and back. So it was in the prime milk carton position of the store. There was a whole row of all of our games right there, and you could see them. So once you've released the game, what the next thing you do is hope. You have to hope that people will buy it. You can make an amazing game, but you cannot make a success. It's your players that will make the success. As we all know, EB Games is no more. And even the most successful games will end up in the bargain bin at Walmart. 20 years later, Star Trek Conquest Online, you can buy it on eBay right now for $4.98. There's actually like 9 copies on there, probably being sold as collectibles for Star Trek. But it didn't take 20 years for it to get to that price. In fact, it was about 99 cents a month later after we released it, because we released an online collectible card game when AOL was still a thing. So most people didn't even have computers at the time. So I mean, it didn't have modems at the time. So unfortunately, we were ahead of our time. But if you do want to buy this game and try it out, you can. So what comes next in game development? Well, as you've probably guessed from what I've said, video game development requires a lot of money. You need a large team to get this done, unless you want to do something really small and not make much money for it. It's a career. The people that I know that are really successful in video games have done it their entire lives, and I'm happy to introduce you to them if you're really interested in doing this. I mean, I did it for about 7 or 8 years of my career, and I've been an advisor to game people ever since. But it's not something that you dabble in. You cannot just have a game concept if you want to get it sold to someone. You have to go all in and develop it yourself. And if that means that you develop the cards for a game, like this. Scott Hanselman did show and tell, and so am I. So here are concept cards that were done for Cron X, and they're right here. And if you go, and I'll have this slide at the end that shows you where you can download it, you can actually play Cron X as a printable card game. Or you can download the original file from 25 years ago and play it on your Windows computer. It still plays. So develop any foothold you want, and you can get into a studio. I started out as a booth babe, and I ended up working on, actually, before I was a booth babe, I was a beta tester for Connections, for the Discovery Channel, for their game that they released. But it was pretty awesome. You need to make a game wrong at least 2 or 3 times before you find the right path. Unfortunately, our original version of Star Trek Conquest Online did not work, but then we fixed it, we patched it, and people started to play it. And we were doing well until 9/11 happened, and then no one played games for a bit. So we were on the upward trend. We had gotten people interested, but you can't stop the world from doing what it's going to do. But it didn't stop the rest of my company from staying in games if they were going to be in games. In fact, I still worked for another game company after that, and we created 3 more games. So that was pretty cool. So here are some resources from industry sites. Like if you're really interested in this, sloperama.com, it's like a site that looks like it's from 1980, but it's awesome. Definitely read all the forums on there. GameDev.net, really useful. If you want to play that game that I was talking about that I fell in love with, you can find Hitchhiker's Guide on that site right there. You can download and play Chronex at that site. You can find me at heatheriel.com. And I'm going to pass this back over to our amazing MCs. So unless there is more time for our, yes, there we go.